We are all so busy these days, and we're always looking for helpful tips and advice on how to find a better work-life balance. We all have to earn a living and pay the bills, but are you doing enough to look after yourself and your health at the same time? Now, many of us prioritise careers and work, and we're slaving over our computers and mobiles all the time. But does this make you cut corners on your diet, exercise or sleep? I'm Dr. Ben Sinclair, and welcome to Health versus Wealth with Dr. Ben. Our guests share their life experiences and we discuss their challenges in their health and their wealth. I hope their experiences will help you with your life and health. I'm delighted today to be joined by Rachel Ingram of Cadmium Partners, and she runs this business building boards and coaching boards. So welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ben.
Great to have you here. And I think you're our first theology graduate. Tell me, how did it all start with theology, getting into building boards?
That is quite an honour, thank you. I have always been fascinated by what makes people tick, and theology, I guess, in some ways is applied religion. And I'm always interested in the big picture of why people do what they do, particularly why they believe what they do. It's always been fascinating to me. So that's what got me down that road. And I also had a phenomenal teacher who inspired me to go there. And in fact, he sent a Jew, a Catholic and a Muslim to Oxford to study theology.
Wow.
So that was quite a big deal. But yes, I think it set me on a good train to really kind of getting under the skin of why people do what they do, why they're motivated to do what they do, what makes them tick, yes.
How interesting. Now, obviously, it's never a straight path to your sort of final destination of what you're doing now. But after uni, you went into television at Carlton. Have you made programmes yourself?
I have. So I was on their graduate scheme in 2000, year of the dot-com boom. So I did lots of different things in the business, strategy, sales, marketing and things on the tech side. But I got very into documentary making and made some local documentaries, including with people like the late Benjamin Zephaniah, but short documentaries really about issues that were affecting Londoners, and also did a bit of filming in your local studios here in Birmingham.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's good that you've got a bit of a local stamping ground. Now, fast forwarding through all that experience, after years of philanthropy and headhunting, you set up Cadmium Partners. What sort of clients are you helping at the moment, and what do you do?
So I've been a headhunter for 17 years, working mainly with boards, so advising people and working with senior individuals to help them get board ready, to join boards of FTSE companies, of global corporates, and also increasingly now tech firms, so growth companies that are growing very fast. And we work with people at all sort of ages and stages. So they could be founders who've set up their own businesses, or they could be senior business leaders who want to sit on a board and become a chair, and we help them on that road, on their journey, and our clients are diverse, I'd say.
This is really interesting to hear, and I know you help both women and men.
Yes.
What's your opinion of the glass ceiling?
I mean, it's there to be broken, but I think lots of female senior leaders, and I work with CEOs and chairs and of women and men, as you've pointed out. I mean, I think many of them find that there's less of a glass ceiling than there was. Some will tell you that the ceiling is cement, and some will tell you that they've shot through the glass and they're kind of out the other side. So very mixed feelings about how it is to get there. I think what's made the difference for lots of women is the quality of mentoring that they've had, mainly from senior men, but also from other women who've got there, but allowing them really to kind of do things in different ways, to be more flexible. COVID in some ways helped a lot of women because it allowed them to have the space they needed to be able to work from home in a different way, for everyone to understand that different strokes were needed to allow women to kind of move forward. But as the stats show, the FTSE stats show, we're still quite a long way off getting to 40% of leaders in the FTSE, women leaders in the FTSE. But we're on the way for that for 2025. And boardrooms do look very different to how they looked 10 years ago. There are many more women, many more diverse leaders who sit around our board tables in this country. So things are changing.
It's good to hear that as a father to two daughters who, I would hope don't have the same challenges, and you've broken through that. with all that hard work. Now, another thing that can affect people is burnout, and people are bashing against this brick wall, this cement ceiling. Sometimes they can suffer burnout. What's your opinion of sabbaticals and career breaks, and do you think they're helpful?
So lots of things there. I mean, I think most of the people we work with have been working for some time, but we work with people, everyone from founders who are in their 30s to chairs and business leaders in their 60s, sometimes even 70s. So there's a long road, and we may all be working much, much longer and much, much later. So I think there's now much more of a sense that people need to pace themselves. There's life stuff, having kids, obviously, illness, ill health, caring responsibilities, all those things that will be affecting us for longer. So I think for people to think much longer term about their future, because if you go very hard, very fast, and you're accelerating for a short period of time, many people do burn out. And we work with, as I said, founders in their 30s who've somehow they've hit the wall early, and it's been tough for them, and they've had to take some time out. So I think a good analogy is, many people who are putting their foot on the gas, pushing, running really hard, really fast at that glass ceiling, at that startup that they want to build, create, exit, list, float, whatever it might be, that actually there comes a point where you do need to decelerate. And that happens to many people. And I think there are often warning signs, and you'll know as well as I do, it could be physical, it could be mental, there could be an event, a particular crisis, or it could just be a general feeling that family and friends are saying, you're not quite yourself. And it isn't really talked about. And actually, the startup community are probably better at talking about these things than business leaders. Although, again, some leaders in banking and other areas have got better at talking about how their mental health has been affected by just not being able to carry on. So I think employers are getting much more sympathetic and understanding to people's boundaries and real just barriers of where they need to stop and where they need to say, look, enough is enough. Coming back to your point about sabbaticals, sometimes that's a forced issue where people need to say, I just can't do this for a bit, I need a bit of time out. Some well-provisioned employers factor that in. So there are kind of big names where they'll say, look, you've been here for a long time, we'll give you some time off. They factor it generally into people's employee contracts. So every 7 years you've got time out to do a project, or every 5 years some newspapers will allow you to write a book, or whatever it might be. Something like that. But I think for many people there comes potentially a crisis where they need to say, okay, I need to pause here, I need to reflect, I just need to decelerate, take my foot off the gas.
Exactly. Now, I know you took a career break yourself. Would you mind telling me a little bit about your story and what led up to that? Yeah,
so I was very happy to talk about it. I was a headhunter. I worked for amazing partners, but the lead partner is called Jan Hall, and we were a top executive search firm working on lots of high-profile board and CEO roles. And I reached a point where we'd been trying to have a baby for a number of years, and there was a point at which I felt like I had the full responsibility of the company on my shoulders, but actually combined with going through very intensive IVF, something was going to give. And I think my husband turned to me one day and said, something is going to give. We need to pause and kind of take stock. And fortunately for me, I had a fantastic boss who was very understanding, and they said, right, just drop everything. We'll cover you. You need to do what you need to do. And I had reached that point where it was either we have a baby or I carry on with my job. Something's got to go.
Something was going to change.
And fortunately for us, the baby won.
So how did that come about? You had the career break.
I did. So
the boss granted this, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I took some time out. We were at a very, I'm sure there are, as I know, there are many, many couples going through this, and it's very tough, and not all workplaces are as empathetic and sympathetic as mine were, and it's a real issue. And I've also been in a situation where I've had to do things in secret, and there'll be many women out there who'll feel very familiar of the story of having to shoot up your fertility drugs in the bathroom and do lots of things in private, in secret. And that's hard. It's very hard. And you're trying to sort of do your job at the same time. So I think things are changing. Employers are getting closer to understanding the pressures that many women, particularly in their 30s and 40s, are under when they're trying to start a family. So we went through IVF. We were at this particular clinic that was, I'd say, boot camp central, probably the toughest place to try and have a baby, but it worked. And so we were lucky. It worked first time at this clinic. It was actually our 4th round of IVF, and she is now our older daughter is now 6.5.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah.
I always find as a doctor, I see people who are incredibly busy trying to get pregnant either through natural means or through assisted means like IVF. Sometimes when they stop, the body just relaxes, and it all just happens.
Yeah.
Do you think that the career break gave you that opportunity?
It's a funny thing because the jury's out as to how much stress actually affects your ability to conceive or your ability for your IVF to work. So I think there's lots of studies out there, and half will say, yes, it does affect it, and half will say, yes, no, it doesn't. We were in a situation where we were lucky that I could pause what I was doing. Not everyone is as lucky as to be able to do that. So I think it's one of those things where you've just got to keep going. But there are also, for some couples, the right decision is just to say, we've got to stop at this point. It takes a huge toll on you physically. It takes a huge toll on couples. It takes a huge toll financially as well. So there's lots of different factors. And I think the differentiator for us was that this particular clinic was very demanding, and it allowed me probably to rest more and feel better going into that particular cycle of IVF.
Right.
But we were very lucky to have a second daughter again after many more rounds of IVF. And with that one, I had my own business, so I had some more flexibility around how I worked. But I was actually very busy at the time that we conceived her, but I just had the ability to go to appointments and do the things I needed to do.
So it sort of worked around it. And it's such a challenging thing, isn't it? Because we're all busy working, and sometimes fertility comes later and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And yet, there's still that desire to maybe be a mum, have a family.
Yeah.
It's so exciting that it's now all happened for you, and you
all at the same time.
Oh, well, it never. We can't choose when these things happen, can we?
We can't.
And I always say there are some bad times to have a baby, but there's never a right time.
Yeah.
Now, work-life balance comes into play. You're running your own business.
Yeah.
You're also advising clients on how to balance their work life. I imagine you're still working fairly long hours.
Yeah.
And you've got these 2 fantastic children that you've wanted for a long time. How's it going? How's that working out, your balance at the moment?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm able to take my own medicine, but having done lots of different things in lots of different ways, it's not that easy, and it's definitely still a work in progress. So I'm married to an entrepreneur who and he is also going a million miles an hour. So both of us are trying to do the things that we need to do, but it does involve, times a day where you can't do things. You've got the kids, you want to be able to do bath time, bedtime, that sort of thing. But what that means, the knock-on effect is we end up doing lots of emails quite late at night, which is exactly what I tell people not to do, and to get their sleep and to relax and wind down and all those things. But last night I was definitely sitting in front of my laptop at midnight sending off emails. But I work with lots of CEOs and founders, and that seems to be how everyone works. But we all have that desire to slow down, switch off, and of course there are different ways we can do that. But I'd like to say that I do that better. So let's keep talking on that.
No, totally. And I confess, I think anyone who says I've got it perfect is either lying or has a huge team of people that they have offshored everything to.
Yes.
Which means they may not be even present with some of the things they should be doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a constant balance, and I have so much respect for you, with what you're managing to do right now, and still running your own business. You're both busy people. I'm married to a busy lawyer, and we have 3 children, and equally, we can't always have our cake and eat it.
No, I think the one thing I would say is I was given some very good advice recently to outsource as much as possible. At times of particular stress. So, not only having small kids, but also aging parents where there's, lots of things going on. It's one of those things where if you can call in help wherever you can, wherever you need
Absolutely.
it. And I'm lucky I've got a brilliant assistant at work. I have a business partner as well. So, there's all sorts of people who allow us to do the things that we need to do. But it's always a juggle, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you. Offshore everything that you don't need to be doing, and then do the things that you really feel are going to be adding value, that are your special thing, and if you can, and there's always people who can help, and we are the squeeze generation. We have aging parents who are still around often, and young children, and we're at the cutting edge of our careers. It's everything is squeezed, so we've got to be super jugglers. It's so hard, isn't it? How's your sort of exercise and diet regime going, if I may ask? Because these are the things that really can fall by the wayside for us CEOs of companies.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think that's one of those things, again, a work in progress. I mean, I think most people you'll talk to, I'm sure, are having those.
Everyone is struggling with work-life balance.
Deliberate attempts to try and be healthier. We're all determined to try and do more exercise, to eat better. I think if you can get the basics right, and we were just talking, chatting about how we're trying to feed our kids healthily and get them into good habits.
Yeah.
I think, that 80-20 rule is probably quite important, isn't it? You try your hardest, you try to cook some, decent healthy dinners a few nights a week, but you've got to have a bit of room to have a glass of wine when you need it, and and try and just, live your life and have some fun as well.
Absolutely. It's not about perfection. I think it's about reality.
Yeah.
I think, I love your sort of very realistic attitude. But it's also about the things we do every day.
Yeah.
The things that we become more like. Now, I cheekily asked you about, sort of exercise. I know you're working 56 hours a week, 50 or 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
And you made a statement. You said that you didn't have time for PT. And I'm thinking, yep, I relate to that. Tell me about exercise. Does that happen?
Well, I was. That was it. The joke is that I did briefly have a trainer, but I just don't have time for the trainer anymore.
Okay.
When would I squeeze her in?
Yeah.
So I think
when we're juggling one baby, running.
That's
with
right. So that's it. I do a lot of running to and from. There's school drop off. There's all those things. I do feel like I'm constantly running.
Do you have the running buggy?
I don't have the running buggy.
Because I did that once.
Double
buggy.
That would be brilliant. Exactly. The sort of double buggy that you're running with. Yeah. But I think it's a question of just trying to get some things into your routine, trying to do a bit of stretching, trying to do some things that keep you a little bit zen, keep you calm, as well as a bit of cardio. But I think for all of us that are under the cosh for so many things in our lives, it's more about, coming down as well as kind of pumping yourself up.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I think, we're living high-paced, sort of stratospheric lives.
Yes.
So actually, I totally agree with you. It's about coming down and winding down. We've got enough adrenaline. We've got enough drive. That's why I love yoga. And I know you do yoga as well.
I do. Yes. Again, when I have time.
When you have time, yeah.
But I think it's been important to make time for that in particular. And just, that feeling that you've got a bit of space, a bit of time to stretch, get stronger. I think there is that feeling, and I hear that time and time again from lots of people that I work with. We all need to feel as strong as we can. We've got so many competing demands on us. So whatever makes you feel strong in yourself, whether that's through running or yoga or, breath work or meditation, just something that gives you that sort of inner strength to, keep on trucking.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about yoga is it's quite a sort of holistic exercise. It involves breath work and strength and, core and flexibility. Yeah. So if you do it right, and you've got to do it right, then actually you are combining a lot of things into one that are really good for you. It's like a sort of powerhouse of everything.
Well, they're trying to do it with your baby, which I did try, was a complete misnomer. I mean, that was the least relaxing thing in the world.
I can't imagine that being very relaxing. How do you do that?
Well, you can sort of balance them or lift them, but there comes a point where they're just not very compliant. So
and they're not going to be doing a downward dog with you, or
they definitely can't do that.
No. Okay, I think that might be taking it a step too far for me. Just to
I agree.
Bring the yoga baby. Now, I mean, we know yoga is good for sleep.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that you're answering emails late at night.
Yeah.
Tell me about sleep, because you scored yourself about 6 out of 10 when we did a sort of thing earlier. Yeah. One of our last podcast guests was really drumming into us the importance of sleep for performance in all areas of health and wealth.
Yeah.
Tell me about your sleep habits. How much are you getting at the moment?
I mean, interestingly, there are lots of CEOs that I work with or founders who get by on very little sleep. So the question is, you can do that for periods of time,
Yes.
but then what happens? So I think we all go through phases like that, don't we?
We all have to go through squeezes sometimes.
That's right.
And also with young children, you get interrupted sleep, so you've got to just snatch
yes.
it sometimes, haven't you?
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, I think that aside, like you say, sometimes that it finally catches up with you.
Yeah.
And I always say it's not just about the quantity, but it's about the quality.
Yeah.
And if there was one thing I was going to say to you, we know about blue light coming out of screens, mixing metaphors, trying to keep the bedroom as a place for sleep, and not bringing screens into the bedroom. And I've really seen so many CEOs benefit from actually rigidly leaving the screens aside for at least an hour, if not 2 if you can, before bed, because you just see their sleep quality improve. And if you measure it with a ring or whatever, it just seems to really improve your quality of sleep. Your brain's not thinking about those things.
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And actually, those founders who I work with who have gone through burnout, the first thing that they often try and do will be to have those breaks, where they're putting their phones away. Some tech leaders are very good at going on retreats where you're literally parking your devices and you're not taking them with you. Yeah. Again, back in the real world, when you're not in crisis mode and not taking time out, I think it's much harder. And I think the pressures for all of us to kind of stay on top of our many emails. We talk about the advance of AI, but email was meant to change our lives and make everything simpler. But I'm sure that most people we're talking to are just, they're wading through vast amounts of emails. So that's, a constant discussion for anyone that I'm, on the coaching side is how do you communicate? And actually one of the things that's come through is the drive, the desire to get much more in person with people, to be, okay, it might be on WhatsApp, but, try and do more face-to-face, try and cut down that amount of emails that we're all CC'd on that you feel you've got to respond to. So just kind of, learning to prioritise. On a personal note, I wish, again, I could take my own medicine. But
it's hard, isn't it?
It's hard. It's hard. So, you try things, you work things out, you try and see if you can find a better system and way of doing it. But last night, apart from being on the emails till the middle of the night, we had both daughters in our bed at various points in the evening, and that's life. And there's a few years of your life where this is what it's like.
I mean, my kids are now sort of, the youngest is 8, and we're finally getting to the point where they're in their own beds the majority of the time, unless they're ill. And it's so good to finally get your space back, and actually I'm getting some great sleep, even if it's like 6 hours. It's really good quality.
I salute you.
And it's been a long, hard slog, and and this is the reality of running your own business and trying to do these things. We're trying to do too many things, and I do admire the focus on just one particular thing, trying to get that right. We're a work in progress. I love that phrase you said earlier.
Yeah.
And I know that you tried an interesting sort of diet to help you with your health as well. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I guess I got very aware of diet. So we went through 10 years of IVF and fertility treatment. And during that time, it became, having read a lot about it, became very important to just understand what makes for good fertility, and that sort of, eating nutrient-rich diets and all those things, but also just being aware of blood sugar levels and that sort of thing. And it was just a regime that worked for me, and I've stuck with it. So there's a great writer that I'm sure lots of people would have heard of, who's a big Instagram hit, called The Glucose Goddess. And, there's many things out there, all the 5-2 diets and things like that. But, really just kind of keeping an eye on your GI and, understanding what drives your blood sugar and generally what that means for your ups and downs during the day. And again, lots of people I work with are very heavily caffeinated. They're going from early on. We're talking about sleep. So again, just kind of helping from a coaching point of view, helping people to just be aware of what they're consuming.
What their habits are.
What their habits are, exactly.
And they're often unconscious habits, aren't they? And, you mentioned caffeine. Sometimes it's just knee-jerk to have your coffee in the morning. But my PT was saying, no, don't do it straight away. Go for your run first. And then maybe have your coffee, but after breakfast, because you'll absorb your nutrition better if you're having this healthy breakfast, if you haven't had the caffeine. And you want your natural cortisol to rise to wake you up naturally. So I've had to change things around. Everything's being sold to us. We're always sold to have a bigger, have a better coffee, have more cream, have more toppings, and it just pushes everything in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it does.
Caffeine's a real a bugbear, but I love the GI diet. And for the listeners, that's about balancing your blood sugar essentially, and what you eat and how you eat it. So you might eat, I don't know, a bit of cake, but have lots of yogurt with it, and that might slow down the blood sugar absorption of the maybe less healthy choice, but actually help it to be a better absorption rate, slower.
Yeah.
And then you don't get spikes of blood sugar, less inflammation, less high-low, and so it goes on. And I think those kind of diets can work really well to fuel us. And you mentioned 5-2, it's more about sort of fasting, intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Again, we're getting into a low inflammation state, and we're helping to sort of balance out blood sugar. And lots of my clients were actually using the blood sugar monitors for a couple of weeks. Have you done that to see what it's like?
I haven't done it, but I've got a client, actually a coaching client, who is doing, she sort of hacked it, and she buys her own monitors and she's just kind of doing her own thing. But I think it's also, again, sort of balancing all of that with just sort of trying to not get overly conscious of, all these things, and just try and live a kind of good, happy, balanced life.
Not to be too intense about it.
Exactly.
It's got to be intentional, but we don't want to just create a rod for our backs.
Exactly.
That will just become more stress, which is what we're trying to avoid, isn't it?
Exactly.
So, Rachel, how do you unwind? Have you got any hobbies?
I do. So there's a number of things that I love doing, but I guess my first and foremost love is painting, which is something that's quite time intensive. So again, I don't get to it too often, but in fact, Cadmium Partners, my business, is named after paint pigments: cadmium red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow. So I love to paint when I have time. It allows me to get into a flow of zoning out, really kind of getting away from the day-to-day and using a different part of my brain, which I think if you can find that thing in your life that takes you into that flow, that different place where you are able to tune out, it's hugely beneficial for your ability to just unwind and relax, whatever that might be. So one of my clients had weightlifting as hers, another one that goes for walks, other people like to dance, whatever it is that takes you to that happy place. I think is really important.
That's lovely. And therapeutic activity is so important. My final piece of advice when we're talking about advice is, as a parent, if you're structuring your life a certain way, your children are going to be modelling their adult lives on our lives. Mm-hmm. And so actually, if we look at our lives, how can we structure our lives in a way that we'd want our children to live their adult lives? And that's the lens through which we wouldn't want to beat ourselves up with, but we might look at certain decisions and choices, because it's not just us, we're modelling that for them. Mm-hmm. And I'd encourage anyone who's a business owner or a very busy person to look at their own life and think about how their children might live theirs by watching what we're doing.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we were, in terms of thinking about when people have needed to take career breaks or time out, one of the key moments that I see for people is often when their kids are teenagers, rather than necessarily when they're very small, but because for exactly that reason, that they're starting to look at the world and there are issues that they need their parents around, not just their mothers, but also their dads or whoever is the caregiver. And I think that's that moment, as you say, we're thinking about how do I live my life, what do I want my kids to see, and how do I want to be interacting with them.
That's great advice, Rachel. We've run out of time today, but it's lovely having you on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Thank you for all your great wisdom. So that's it for today. I hope my guest and I have helped you meet some of your health versus wealth challenges. Now, to hear more from me, Dr. Ben, why not subscribe on your usual podcast platform? And if you like my advice or you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me on podcast@drfinlays.co.uk. Anyway, I hope to see you again, but for now, it's goodbye from me, Dr. Ben.